Welcome back to the Homeless Boys Productions channel. I'm Puncakeman, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about a game that I've been playing for quite some time now. More specifically, Marvel Strike Force. So, without further ado, here are the top 5 reasons why you should play Marvel Strike Force and 5 reasons why you shouldn't.
Podcast, podcast, podcast. Podcast, podcast, podcast. Podcast, podcast, podcast. Podcast, podcast, podcast.
But first, what is Marvel Strike Force? Basically, for those of you who don't know, here's a quick rundown of the game. Marvel Strike Force is a game where you open off to collect character shards, which you then use to unlock characters which you upgrade by training them and equipping gear. You then form teams of 5 characters each to bring into battle in a turn-based battle system with several different game modes, including Arena, Blitz, and Campaign mode. You can also join alliances with 23 other players where you participate in raids and alliance wars. Participating in these game modes gives you credits, which you can then use in the respective stores: Arena Store, Blitz Store, Raid Store, and the War Store. On top of that, there are also the 2 main currencies in the game: Gold, which is, well, supposed to be anyway, widespread, and Power Cost, which are the premium currency that you can use to buy orbs and refresh things and all that. It's complicated. So with that out of the way, let's start with 5 reasons why you should play Marvel Strike Force. Well, as you can obviously tell, Marvel Strike Force is a Marvel game, which includes all your favorite Marvel characters: Iron Man, Captain America, Nick Fury, Thor, Thanos, Star-Lord, Doctor Strange, Gamora, Mystique, Juggernaut, Wolverine, Magneto, Professor X. Wait, no, that guy isn't in the game yet, sorry. The point is, who doesn't love Marvel? Also, Marvel Strike Force also happens to be one of the 3 good Marvel mobile games that exist: Marvel Future Fight, Marvel Contest of Champions, and Strike Force. Take it from a person who has played all 3. Strike Force is clearly the best. Contest of Champions is too confusing, and Future Fight is too easy. Of course, Strike Force has its issues too, but we'll talk about that later. Strike Force also happens to be the only game that does not require you to have good timing or reflexes, which brings us to the next point. Marvel Strike Force follows a turn-based battle system, much like the one in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, if you played that game. In case you don't know what a turn-based game is, it's basically a game where instead of using a joystick to move and using another button to shoot and so on, like in Fortnite and pretty much every first-person shooter out there, each character takes a turn to use one of 2 or 3 abilities that they have, depending on the character. Each ability on each character in Strike Force have different effects and deal different amount of damage. Some characters, such as Groot, have healing abilities, while others, like Rocket Raccoon, have abilities that deal massive amounts of damage. This makes the game more about strategic planning and team building. In fact, probably the most essential aspect of the game is team building. Mixing and matching different characters to create different combinations or teams of characters allows for different strategies that you can use to defeat opponents. This makes the game very diverse, and you can come up against many different types of teams, which also makes the game very unpredictable and keeps content fresh. But enough about that, let's move on. While the storylines of Marvel Future Fight and Contest of Champions are rather convoluted and confusing, Marvel Strike Force's campaign mode is pretty straightforward. Although since there are multiple campaigns, sometimes it gets confusing when each campaign happens in the timeline, since you can jump around between campaigns, but mostly the campaigns are all pretty much separate. Back to the storyline. In Marvel Strike Force, the main villain is this big blue guy. No, not that one. That one. Called Ultimus. Basically, Ultimus goes around different dimensions conquering them, and using a thing called a conversion device to turn the heroes of that dimension to his side. Then, with his new converted heroes and villains, he moves on to new dimensions and uses them to conquer more dimensions. Pretty good explanation for the fact that there can be multiple versions of the same hero fighting each other. You are then known as the Commander, who commands Strike, which is actually an acronym for Special Tactical Reserve for Interdimensional Key Events. Thus the name Strike Force. You're then supposed to gather a team for Strike to defend your dimension from Ultimus. This is something new which I find will be very interesting to see in the comics. Alright, now moving on to number 4. Marvel Strike Force has over 10 million downloads so far, but yet MSF community is still very closely knit, and they're really committed to the game too. Discord servers have been set up for the game, and alliances are very organized. This is good, as you can easily get help for the game and interact with others who play. Ever need help? Simply go to MSF Discord server and ask, and there are also several different content creators you can watch, whom I'll link in the description below, who cover all kinds of content that is put out. There's quite a lot of that, which brings us to the next point. Strike Force has been around for about a year or so, and already so much content has been put out. You can definitely count on the developers to release new characters as the movies are released. Unlike Future Fight or Contest of Champions, where a lot of content has already been released and there's not much new content, Strike Force still has tons of new content coming out, so you're pretty much in the same boat as everyone else, and you're constantly working to unlock new characters that are being released. It can be a bad thing, but we'll talk about that later. So now that we've talked about why you should play Marvel Strike Force, let's move on to why you shouldn't play it. As much as Strike Force is a great game with great aspects to it also has its flaws, many flaws. So let's get into it. Now, this is the biggest issue with Marvel Strike Force, and it's also the most self-explanatory. MSF has many bugs that pop up every now and then, although admittedly the developers have been good at giving compensation for the bugs that happen with much needed resources like power cores or ability materials. But the bugs can still cause this huge disruption for the player base because MSF requires you to log in a lot and definitely every day if you want to keep up competitively. Of course, you can just log in once in a while and play really casually, but that would mean you will be gaining levels and power really slowly, which would mean that you will be very far behind and disconnected from the rest of the player base. Thus, you have to then embark on a daily grind to play Blitz, Raids, and Arena in order to get better at the game and upgrade your characters. Of course, if you enjoy the game, then it's fine, but after a while you might start to burn out, causing you to fall behind, like I did at some point. This would then worsen an already bad problem, which is basically, one of the reasons why you have to play every day is so that you get resources such as gold and training and ability materials so that you can upgrade your characters and progress in the game. But unfortunately, the developers haven't been very kind with these resources. Of course, it has gotten better as the game has been updated, but it's still an issue that many players face, that they don't have enough resources. Sometimes though, players resort to spending money on the game, which brings us to the next point. Sometimes you have a little bit of extra money and decide, okay, maybe I can use this to boost my progress in the game. Or you thought wrong. For example, in the game currently, 45 Ant-Man shards and some gear cost 30 Singapore dollars. For comparison, I could buy lunch for about 10 days with that money, assuming I eat chicken rice from the local coffee shop every day. Unless you're really devoted to the game or a content creator, no one would spend that amount of money on a mobile game. Speaking of people who spend that much money on the game, brings us to our next point. Of course, the few people who spend a heck a lot of money on the game, known as Krakens and Whales, would then dominate the game as they have a huge advantage over other players. These people spend almost thousands of dollars a month on the game, and they've probably almost maxed out every character, which means that they're probably at the top of their arena shard, get first place in almost every blitz, and the Legion of Cable, the number one alliance in the game, is filled with Krakens, and it's about a few million collection power higher than the second highest alliance. This then separates them from the rest of the player base, which is fine, but it's depriving others who do play a lot to get where they were of the number one spot in the various game modes, but otherwise it isn't too big of a problem. So, there's a list of the top 5 reasons why you should and shouldn't play Marvel Strike Force. Hopefully this has helped you decide whether or not to pick up the game, or given you an introduction to the game. We'll be putting out more Marvel Strike Force content in the future, so stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!